conversation this morning on Faultlines. I was there with Garland Nixon and Lee Stranahan, the two gentlemen in the back. You see me right here, but Garland is over there. And we had a really good conversation. The show is often good when I'm there. You know, it's a trio's interaction per se. But personally, I think the show is always good when I'm there. I think the show is good in general, but extra special when this guy's there. So the show we did this morning, we got on the subject almost accidentally on Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is a fascinating candidate, man. I've been asking her for an interview because I want to get into, when people have interviews with Tulsi Gabbard, they go over the boilerplate stuff. Hey, you used to be anti-gay. Okay, that's interesting. What brought you to your anti-war position, etc.? I'm more interested in the philosophy of it, if that makes sense. There is no way you can ask her every discrete question. And for the most part, you find that questions start to repeat when you're looking at her interviews over various platforms. I am fascinated about these things of war, meaning people take certain military dominance traits for a reason, and that gets instantiated in just the world's order. Somebody that has an advantage doesn't necessarily want to give up the advantage, and from their standpoint, they want to maintain the differential advantage between them versus you. So in order to get some level of equality within a society, something has to take place within regard to that advantage. And if we're talking about nations, they're not going to allow that to take place. Now, I'm not going to get into it. I've asked in other places, but I just would love to have Tulsi on for an interview. That said, the question that takes place today is, and if I'm not mistaken, Lee brings this up, this thing that Tulsi wasn't on board for the Russia stuff. Tulsi wasn't on board for the Venezuela stuff. Tulsi wasn't on board. Like, you can go across one issue to the next where her philosophy on this has allowed her to just call it what it is. Venezuela is a regime change war. No hedge. That's exactly what it is. That's what I'm calling it. Syria was a regime change war. That's exactly what it is. And all of this in the face of a media organization that has essentially tried to browbeat her over and over again and try to get her to go with the corporate line that she would not do. Part of the reason that people like her so much, especially from the left, this feeling that people have about her when they listen to her, she's extremely calm. And I think that's, in an odd way, works against her, even though to some degree it works for her. Yes, you can be both at the same time. By the same token, when she's talking about the war stuff, it resonates. People dislike our foreign policy. They hate the fact that when people are talking about Venezuela, let's say like a Bernie Sanders, he has to do this two-step where Maduro is a horrible dictator, blah, 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 but we shouldn't. Just call it what it is. Sanders toes that particular line because Sanders is trying to win, and he believes that he has a chance of winning, meaning he has to moderate his position on this. Tulsi is in this policy, I don't necessarily think because she can win, but more so because she can influence the policy at the end of this. Meaning, if you could put Sanders to the left, even better. You can still get your policy instantiated even if you are not necessarily the candidate. Let's get to the video, because I thought the video was good. I talked to Faultlines, they allowed me to use the video. What the question eventually boiled down to is, should Tulsi Gabbard, who didn't support the Russia stuff, who didn't support the Venezuela stuff, who didn't support the Syria stuff, should that person who didn't support those things, meaning far ahead of the other Democratic candidates in this race in regards to just calling a spade, should she push back harder on the Russia issue? Meaning, if you were her campaign manager and you wanted to try to find a space for her to break through, to kind of resonate with the audience in a way that she just doesn't become background, then going all in and repudiating this kind of Russia hacking narrative and make it very clear that this is somewhat of a propaganda campaign on the United States itself. Let's go into this, because each of us have different perspectives on this, which makes this awesome. And all of us are kind of going back and forth at each other over this. So, Faultlines this morning.
To this, right? But my point being, a lot of those of us, that group of people, right, who did that, are in a lot of ways all discussing who got it wrong.
Yeah.
We're discussing this person got it wrong and kind of gloating and doing end zone dances. This person got it wrong, that person. And as Lee said, you haven't won anything because they're still pushing some false narrative. But my point being, the people out here who got it right, who are now discussing this is who got it wrong and we need to beat up on them and we need to blah, 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 which to some extent, when people have been attacked and called Russian bots for 2 years, they have a right to defend themselves and to do some gloating. But I'm saying those people also, we all need to start having being part of that discussion, saying, okay, those schmucks got it wrong. Forget them. Let's talk about the fact that there's a bunch of people that got it right. And let's talk about the fact that they should be listened to and heard. You know what I mean? So that the people who got it right, instead of all of us focusing on the fun of beating up on people and saying these people got it wrong, saying, okay, now we've got a new dynamic. Okay, but now we need to look at the people who got it right in a broad sense and compare what they're saying.
Back to who are you telling that to?
I'm telling that to the people who got it right and who are now caught up in discussing the people who got it wrong. Yeah. I'm saying it's a good idea to change that discussion and say they got it wrong. Okay, fine. Let's talk about the people who got it right.
So are you talking to Glenn Greenwald?
What's that?
Are you talking?
Yes. He's one of the people that got it right. Yes.
Well, you're talking to two people. You're talking to Glenn, Maite, all these guys, but you're also to some degree talking to the outside people saying, look, these are the people who got it right, and maybe you need to elevate these voices and listen to them.
No, but here's what I'm saying. Okay, so what's the message to Glenn? Let's pick somebody specific. Glenn Greenwald.
My message to Glenn, it would be the same. That's the message to Glenn. It's not different than it's one message.
Okay, so my message is different. Stop being a wussy about the Russia thing. Start doing what Patrick Henningsen did and give credit to Sputnik and give credit to RT. Give credit. Because I haven't seen...
Been on point.
I have not seen Glenn do that. I've not seen Tracy, like I say, I don't know why. It could be that I work for Breitbart. It could be something else. But those guys, I retweet Glenn and Tracy, not to get on their radar, because I see something, I go, well, that's a good point, I agree with it. But a lot of the people on our side, I will say it again to Tulsi, get on Sputnik. Stop giving into this. I'm glad Tulsi did Nico's show. Does that make sense? I'm really glad. But you know what? We deserve not just credit at the Russian-funded media. I'm going to go out. The Russian-funded media had this so much more right between our show and
Becker
and Kiriakou and everybody, and by any means necessary, everybody who's been covering this, most of whom, the vast majority of whom, are progressive or left of progressive. Because Sean and Eugene.
But when you go to RT,
I wouldn't call those guys progressive.
But when you go to RT, you got Peter Lavelle. You got a lot of people that are some people that are conservative on right. On and RT.
But I'm just saying, the Russian media broadly.
But you bring up a good point here, and I'd like to get your thought on this, Jamarl. He brings up a very good point, and that is that even with all of this falling apart, right, the fact that they have continued to push this anti-Russia thing have people that, and I know this for a fact, there are people who don't buy it, who don't believe it, who are pushing back against it, but are still afraid to go on RT, or that still have some fear that they want to say, that are still afraid to say, I don't believe any of it, it's a bunch of crap.
Well, there's still a reality to it. I mean, and that has political consequences. I mean, it's the very fact that this has been seeded in the public for the last 3 years kind of creates a situation where it's difficult to pull it off politically. Like, say for instance, Tulsi does do what you say. And she comes out and says, I don't believe this Russian nonsense, and I want to give credit to RT and Sputnik. Her campaign will be over with tomorrow, because regardless of what we think, the Democratic Party and the media, for the most part, still buys into the nonsense.
I know, but see, what I'm arguing is that I'm not picking personally on you. You're giving solid advice. But I'm borrowing, when you make that argument, you're buying into the nonsense. Let me make an analogy. Let's say it's the 1950s, and there's no active, open gay rights movement. Okay? But Liberace lands a show. And so someone says, this is a big, we're at our secret gay meeting. And someone says, this is a big victory for us. And I go, so. Yeah. And they go, no, this is a big win for flamboyant people.
But it's a secret meeting.
Right. And I'd be like, okay, no, but wait a second. I hear you saying flamboyant. Just say it's a victory for gay. Just say gay. Say that we're gay. because you and I were just making out a few minutes ago. So not you and I, Jamarl, don't worry. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
This is not a victory
But
if you can't say the word gay.
But
therefore, my point is, it is incumbent on somebody to be the first person to step up and
somebody
go,
has to take the lift.
you know what? This whole thing about Russia is BS. So I'm going to do a show. Tulsi Gabbard, am going to spend the full 3 hours on Faultlines with Nixon and Stranahan. I'm just saying, theoretically.
Now, I understand what you're saying, but that's, if you're asking, if somebody said they had a political consultant, what would that political consultant tell Tulsi? And she's already taken these extreme, well, it's not extreme.
Fire those people. They're not going to help her win.
Well, she's taken real positions on Venezuela. She's taken real positions on Yemen. She's taken real positions on the Russia stuff. I mean, I imagine it's so far she may think that she can push the envelope in regards to certain issues. Like, I don't necessarily understand what you're saying, and I agree with you to some degree.
See, I think you're accepting the premise that somehow if people, here's what it is. By doing the interview and coming on and saying whatever she says, which, by the way, if Tulsi Gabbard came on the show and she said something critical of Putin, Andre's got a dump button, and he would not hit it.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
He would not hit it. We've had people come on here. Alan Grayson's been on here. He's very critical of Russia. Very critical.
We had a woman from one of these Syrian human rights fraudulent NGOs come on, and we didn't remember that woman, and
yes.
she told said all of the usual propaganda crap. But we had a discussion with her.
Yeah.
We let her come on and say it.
So the only way to prove them wrong is to do it. And what I'm saying is, Tulsi being 75% brave is not brave enough to make her leap out of the pack. And maybe doing what I'm saying is, to the people who, you admit that this was wrong.
It's nonsense, yeah.
You admit that it was nonsense, then act like it's really nonsense.
But reality is less important than politics. But come on. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Politics determines reality. Bold people taking steps.
Politics is not. It's not necessarily that straightforward. Politics does not always determine reality. There are times where the politics
So she should wait for the people to, on their own, figure out that the whole Russia thing. No,
it's not
never going to happen.
No. Don't misunderstand me on this. I'm just making a very point from a political standpoint. Tulsi Gabbard makes a choice on how far can I actually stick my neck out. And like you said, she's 75% brave, but that 75% brave is more than anybody else that's in that political campaign.
I agree with that. I still support her. I'm saying it's not going to be enough for it's not going to be enough for her to win.
Yeah,
B, 75% brave is not really that brave.
But so here's something I think, and Lee talked about something that made sense the other day, but I think it's all timing about, look, they're going to do everything they can to take her out. So she needs to throw a Hail Mary. She needs to do something. And I agree with that. But here's what I would think if I was advising Tulsi, because there's not a rush. Here's what I'd say. I would say, get to the debates, right? When you go to the debates, make your point strong, because one of here's what I think is the possibility for her. I mean, there's any avenues, but I'll throw one possible avenue of success. If somebody said, what would one avenue of success could possibly be? I'd say, well, here's a possible avenue. She gets to the debate. She makes, in the same way that Bernie got to debates with 6%, with 6%. And he made his argument, which was at that time, it's rigged for the billionaires, which was very popular in the face of, the dichotomy between him and Hillary, right? And it caught fire. And so you never know. So if I was advising Tulsi, I'd say, okay, get the debates, make your anti-war argument, and let's see if you get a bump. Yeah. Let's see if that catches fire, right? If that catches fire after the great debate, we won't have to go. I would have
horrible advice.
But here's what I would say.
Horrible advice.
Okay, but it's my advice. So I would say this. If that catches fire, then we run with that. If it doesn't, then I'd have a number of Hail Marys, and I'd throw some Hail Marys. No, and I'm not saying it's good advice. I'm saying it's my advice.
Here's why I understand that. But what I'm saying is, and it is kind of normal advice. You can't let the people, you got to remember, this is the people who would have said, hey, Bernie, don't say you're a socialist. Like, if you get asked about that, don't say you're a socialist. Just back off. Just say, well, I've been to Russia, and I don't believe in isms or whatever. Part of the reason Bernie was successful in 2016 is because he did say he was a socialist. Yeah. He didn't back down from it.
That's true.
He didn't stutter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true.
He just said, I'm a socialist. Tulsi
Actually, he never
Gabbard
said that.
What's that?
Actually, he never said that.
He never
once.
called himself a socialist.
No, he called himself a democratic socialist.
Yeah, a
every
democratic
single
socialist.
time.
Doesn't make any
But
difference.
people
It makes a
don't.
big
I don't know.
They're
difference.
using
People
the
know
word.
the difference.
To you, it does. It doesn't. To the people who don't like socialism,
They don't
and
know.
to the people who do like
It does make a difference, or they'd say democratic socialism. I'm a firm believer that people
doesn't-
say the word socialist because they know there's a difference. And if they didn't, they wouldn't intentionally omit that word every single time. There is no reason to admit it if you think it's the same.
Does the public think that though? Does the public really know the difference between a democratic
I don't think
socialist
so.
and a socialist? I don't think so.
Right.
I honestly
So
don't
there's
think
no-
so. I think when they
I don't.
hear,
Oh, I know. They don't look. Not only the difference. Here's what I would say. I bet you 90% of the people that say I don't like socialism, if you say what is socialism,
They don't know the
couldn't
difference.
tell you.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. You see that all the time in politics.
But now, so now you're getting into an argument, and but my point's real simple. He used the word socialism. He used the word socialist. He used the word.
Yep.
There's a
Now,
benefit. Yeah.
and it was not like, hey, let's go to the first debate. Let's see how you saying you're a democratic socialist plays. Let's go with your term. I don't care. Doesn't make any difference because it doesn't change my point.
What about Jill Stein?
What about Jill Stein?
They found a picture of Jill Stein and screamed that she was some kind of Russian plant that was there to kneecap Hillary Clinton.
Right,
All
so-
of it was nonsense.
So the
But
way
it didn't matter that it was
there's
nonsense.
two ways to push back on that. One is to kind of cower. By the way, it's a media tactic.
Oh, it is. I know.
What they don't do, what very few people do, is come up and go, let me explain. Here's what it is. This is chess, right? So you don't not take a move because you're going to get hit. In chess, you'll put a pawn out there knowing that the pawn is going to be sacrificed, but you're trying to win a game.
Yeah.
So let's play this through. So Tulsi Gabbard says, I'm going to do 3 hours on Faultlines with Nixon and Stranahan. For instance, I'm just saying, just use that as an example.
This is an example. Yeah.
I'm trying to get an interview too, so I feel you.
Let's say Tulsi said that. Now, what she knows is the media could hit her on it and say, Russia, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Or she could come back and go, now, what she could, sorry, I didn't know Sputnik was Russia. She shouldn't do that.
She can't
right?
say that. Yeah.
So what she should say is, have you listened to the show? She should say, have you listened to the show? It's obviously the best morning news show in America.
You should say that anyway.
and it obviously presents both sides. And I went on the show. I talked about problems I have with Putin. They did not censor me. They did not cut me off. You can listen to the entire 3 hours over at the Sputnik thing. We've been lied to about Russia. We've been lied to about Russian media. This is why it's so important. People have been lied to and told that Sputnik and RT are Russian propaganda. That would imply that we don't say anything true, that literally you should just ignore every single thing we say.
That's right. That's the.
And the only way to fight that is to go, you know what? I did the show. I spent 3 hours on Faultlines with Nixon and Stranahan, Tulsi Gabbard could say, just as an example.
Yeah.
And then say, look, I had a great experience, and people really need to wake up to the fact that this whole thing, I think that helps her. Now, again,
I don't know. I'm wary of that.
I'm skeptical.
myself.
I don't know.
we're both
I don't know
skeptical.
how
I mean, it's a
people-
valid argument. I'm
Yeah.
just skeptical of it.
No. I accept the argument totally. I don't know how. I don't know how.
so
the
you don't
public
think
accepts
Tulsi
it.
should do our show?
Of course. That should be the number one. That's exactly what. That should be the top priority of her campaign. We'll be right back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
That was an awesome broadcast. I love doing that. Like, the wild part is, when I said I was skeptical, it's not so much that I'm skeptical of his plan. I don't, people have all sorts of political strategies. It may or may not work. Sometimes you throw it out and try. All of it is always an appraisal of the world, though, right? Like, there's a thing in your head, or we're assuming that's in our head. We don't necessarily know if our thoughts are purely in our heads. But there's a conception of the world that you have that is some degree different than the next person who's sitting beside you, even though you're occupying, for the most part, the same reality. The objective reality in this is, to some degree, subjective. And when I have my appraisal of the world, I think to myself, with a country that's seeded with this Russian nonsense, can Tulsi Gabbard get through a primary? That's the way I'm looking at it. With all of these Democrats that's been seeded with this idea that even if Trump didn't collude with Russia, which they still don't necessarily believe, you still have a situation of the hacking thing, meaning the Mueller report nailed down this idea of, okay, Trump didn't collude, but those Russians, those dastardly Russians, were putting Facebook and Twitter ads, and they were trying to topple democracy. That's still seeded throughout the society and the population. 50% of the population may think that this is a witch hunt, but you have around the same amount that says, okay, we still think Russia had something to do with hacking the election. I think it's more than half. Or trying to intrude on our elections. So if Tulsi Gabbard comes out, one or two things is going to take place. Either what she's putting out is going to overcome that hurdle, or she's not going to overcome that hurdle. He's right that somebody always has to take a lift, whether you're talking about civil rights, gay rights, whatever, workers' rights. Everybody takes a lift. Somebody's going to take a hit in the face when it first starts. And how hard they push back, whether or not you can overcome that, I don't necessarily think that a campaign wants to directly deal with that. If Tulsi Gabbard wants to talk about her anti-war stuff, having every conversation where you have to also talk about, your thoughts on Russia and whether or not they hacked the election, is not the way to do it. At least in my opinion. I don't know if that gets you to point B in a world that has that much propaganda thrown on it for the last 3 years. But look, I could be completely wrong. She can come out with that argument and start moving the dial. Keep in mind, though, the point is she has to get through a Democratic primary. And of all the political groups, the Democratic Party has been the one that has been, most willing to just suck down that propaganda and be like, yes, Russia, I need my Maddow fix. Give it to me, Maddow. Give it to me. That's my conception of Democrats. All right, guys, you all have a good one. Thank you. Shout out Rick Raven, Civil Disobedience, Von Rabbit, Fred Edwards. What's happening, Fred Edwards? 2 times. Martin 8. Gabbard should call BS on Bernie not calling BS. Oh. Ouch. Uh-oh. Spicy. Spicy. All right, guys. You all have a good one. I'll see you in a few. Bye-bye.